All right, now that we've validated the length of the name and the email address, we should also validate the format of the email. There's no perfect way to do this. There's actually a pattern that every email address is supposed to follow, but it actually allows crazy email addresses like this. Like this is a valid email address according to the standard. Like you can put spaces in the middle of it. It's just crazy. So what we're going to do is actually just require people to have a normal looking email address, which basically everyone does. We'll be using an especially simple variant. If you look at the exercises in chapter 6 of the Rails tutorial, you'll see a more complicated pattern that email addresses can match. But this is a pretty robust one that we're going to look at right now. We're going to be using a technique called regular expressions, which are really quite error prone. They're very complicated and a little tricky. So I'm going to write some tests for valid email addresses first. This is actually just kind of a check on the eventual pattern we're going to use. So let's start with this. I'm going to say email validation should accept valid addresses. And let's put in some valid email addresses. Remember this %w trick, except you have to type the w. This creates a string of, or an array of strings, so %w, like this. So I'm going to put in some email addresses here that should be valid. So user@example.com. It should be case insensitive. So this should also be valid. We should accept underscores and hyphens, a user. This tests that we can accept multiple subdomains, or a subdomain here, foo.bar.org, that should be valid. And let's look at some other common cases. This is a very common sort of pattern. First.last at, and let's do foo.jp. This is the top level domain for Japan, but this just verifies that we can accept 2 instead of 3. This is just not really a proof, but this gives us a sense of the kinds of things we want to accept. This is also documentation. We also want to accept plus signs. This is valid. Alice plus Bob at Baz. Let's do another 2-letter one, CN for China. And for each of these valid addresses, I want to assert that a user with that address is valid. So let's do that. Valid addresses, this is a case of iteration, so we're going to call the each method and give it a block with a single variable do and then the valid address. And then inside the block, we can call the assertion. So we need to do this. We need to do the same trick we've done here at user.email equals, and let's take a look at this. We want this here, equals valid address. And then we want to assert that the user is valid. So let's save that, and this should still be green, right? We're not going red here yet. So this way, if we end up implementing a pattern for the format that disallows any of these, this test will catch that. So now let's put a test in for some invalid addresses. So let's put some invalid addresses in here. Again, this isn't a proof, this is just a selection of common mistakes that people might make. So let's take a look at this. User@example, com should be invalid. You should certainly have to include the @ sign. So let's catch that. You have to include the some sort of top level domain. So example dot should fail. And then let's do foo at, this is a subtle one. Underscores are invalid in this this context. Bar underscore baz.com. So this is not a valid domain name. It's a valid subdomain, but it's not a valid domain name. And then we can do another common one. This is also illegal. This is basically to catch this plus sign because we're allowing it in the names here, in the usernames, but we want to make sure that it's not allowed here. So let's go here and do the same thing that we did here for each of these guys. Invalid addresses dot each. And let's do the same thing, just following the same pattern. And then assert that this user is not valid. Right, so I want to do assert not. Assert not at user.valid. So this should be red. Right. All right, we've gotten to red. So now this is where we have to take up the challenge and actually put a format validation in here. And so what we're going to do is something like this. We're going to say the format needs to be with, and then we're going to put in what's called a regular expression. So we need to talk about that. This is quite tricky. So let's build up the regular expression. This is the kind of thing that you would definitely want to just Google around for and find a decent one. But I want to show you a really cool tool called Rubular that will give us a chance to interactively explore this regular expression. All right, so let's put in these email addresses. I'm just going to paste them in. These are the, actually let's put the valid ones in too. So this is valid email addresses and invalid ones. And let's build up the regular expression. So this is discussed in the Rails tutorial in more depth, but what I want to do is start off with at least one word character. So a word character, as you can see here, is a letter, number, or underscore. This is really helpful. Rubular has this awesome little quick reference here. So we want to start off with a word character, and we also want to allow pluses, like in here, like this here, Alice plus Bob. We want to allow hyphens, and we want to allow dots so that you can do something like first dot last here. So the way to do that in regular expression land is to use this sort of grouping. So this is a word character, \w, which you can see here. And inside these square brackets, we can use things like a plus or a dot, literally. Ordinarily, these have special meanings, like over here. Where's the dot? Here's a dot is any single character ordinarily, but not inside these square brackets. But inside of these square brackets, the hyphen has a special meaning. It defines a range, so we actually have to escape it out with the backslash. Told you regular expressions are fiddly. Actually, I think I said tricky, but they're both. Okay, so that's promising. You can see that Rubular shows us the matches over here. So what this has done is matched words, plus signs, hyphens, and dots. So we want to have this, and then we want the @ character. So you can see it's matching there. Oh, what we want is actually at least one of these things, right? So this should be one or more of those. And the way to do that is with this, the plus sign. So a plus is one or more of a, so we want one or more of these guys followed by an @ sign. You can see over here it's just highlighted the ones that are matching. And then we want to put in at least one letter, digit, hyphen, or dot. So that's things like this. We want to match the dot so that we can do things like this foo at foo.bar.org. So at least one letter, digit, hyphen, or dot. So that's going to be a letter, A through Z. A hyphen, we have to escape it out, or dot. And we want at least one of them, so that's a plus. So after this part of the address, we need an actual dot. And you might be tempted to put just the dot character, as we did inside of the square brackets, but in fact that doesn't work because it needs to be escaped out when it's not inside these square brackets. So let's do this, backslash. You can see that this effect here. This is matching things like a capital C, but we want this here. There we go. And then let's see, we want at least one letter. This is something like the top-level domain. I'm actually not sure if there are any single-letter top-level domains, but there definitely are 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. There are a bunch of new top-level domains, actually, fairly recent ones. So we're not going to reject every invalid address. We just want something that's a pretty good sanity check. So what we're going to do is say that we want at least one letter here. A through Z. Again, this A through Z here is any single character in the range A through Z. And then we want at least one of them, so do plus. And so you can see here now that, in fact, we're matching all of these valid ones, and we're not matching any of the invalid ones except for this one here. This one that has the foo dot capital COM. And that's because this A through Z here actually only matches the lowercase letters. So what we want to do is add an option here, which is /I. You can see down here, that's for case insensitive. So if you put an I in here, that should match the last one. There we go. So this regular expression matches all of the valid addresses and none of the invalid ones. Regular expressions is a huge subject, but this is a good start just to give us a sense of how to match a basic email address. So I'm going to copy this thing, and I'm going to put it in here. And anything this complicated, I'd like to give a name to. So I'm going to call it valid email regex, and I'm going to use all caps. Anytime you start the name of something in Ruby with a capital letter, like user or active record, it's actually a constant. So I could do something like this. I could start it like this, like valid email regex. But in this context where I'm going to be using the constant in regular code and not like the name of a class or anything like that, it's conventional to use all caps. So I'm going to call this valid email regex. So at this point I can just paste in that regex I had, and they go inside these slashes. That's why I put these slashes in here. We're actually going to replace that with this valid email regex. Let's paste it in. And there's actually something that I'm missing here relative to this current application. You don't need these in Rubular. In fact, they won't work. But what we want is for this to be the beginning and end of the input string. And the way to do that, you might be tempted actually, if you've done regular expressions before, to use these characters, the caret and the $sign. You can see here. That's the start of the line and the end of the line, but that's actually not right. That's not what we want. We want the start and end of the string. So that's \A, capital A, \lowercase z. So this is \A and \lowercase z. And this is here, valid email regex. You can see the IDE let me just tab complete there. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to save it, and it should be green. But it's not. Oh, you know why? This is great. I mean, you can actually see the IDE is telling me syntax error. So if you look carefully, you can see that I'm missing a comma here. So now we should be green. Oh, and we're still red. So why is that? Ah, so okay, this is great. It's actually telling us which one is failing. It's line, where is it? It's line 36. And this is actually a useful trick. Maybe I should put this in the book. Probably will. Which is to add in an optional message here, and because actually we don't know which of these addresses failed. So we can say just save this and see which one is failing. I know which one. I mean, I've guessed which one it is, but you can say address. Here we go. And in fact, we can even do inspect. This is nice, because this will put quotes around it. Yeah, address user@foo.com should be valid. So remember that in order to get that one to be valid, this one here, we had to do the /I for case insensitive. Right. So that's what's failing here. What's failing here is that this regex here is actually case sensitive. And so let's put in the /I here. That's the way, like in Rubular, you put it in this little box here, but with a regular expression, you put it here. So let's save that. Now this should be green. All right. It's probably a good practice just to put this here in the same place here. This should be invalid address. It should be invalid. And you can see we've now spilled over the 80 columns, so I'm going to put in a new line. And actually, you know, this is the kind of thing where I might just get rid of it there. There we go. So now if we were to say allow an underscore in here, this one will fail. No, it didn't fail. Why didn't it fail? Oh, maybe it's in here. Let's put an underscore in here. There we go. So now foo@bar_baz.com failed, and the test tells us that right here. There it is. So it's useful. It tells us which one is failing, so we can fix it here.